Hello, welcome to AI in Action. My name is Maurie. I'm here with my husband Jim, and we are about to wrap up a three-part mini-series on data centers. What we're talking about tonight is what do you need to do to make sure that if a data center comes to your town, that you are prepared to get them to be a good neighbor. When people hear that data centers may be coming to their small town, the first thing they usually hear are jobs, tax revenue, economic development, and those things matter. I mean, of course they do, but we don't think that's where the conversation should start. If a data center company has approached a town, what that means is that the town already has something that the company probably wants. It could be land or power or access to a major transmission line. Whatever it is, that company did not pick that town by accident. So the town is not coming into the conversation empty-handed. You actually have something they want. So the first job is not to make the project work for the company. It's to protect the people who already live there. And that means asking some pretty basic questions before anyone gets impressed by the size of the investment. Will this project put pressure on your water supply? Will the residents end up paying more for electricity or utilities? Is the heavy construction going to damage the local roads like sand trucks do here in Llano, Texas? Are emergency services going to need to have additional equipment or training because of the additional population? What about noise, traffic, and just the changes to the character of your community? And after all that, will your town actually be better off? So Jim, I want you to jump in here and tell me what you think. What research? What do you think?
Well, this was the part of the three episodes that I really wanted to do.
Okay.
Because in some places it's hard to argue. There's a level of inevitability for some of these things. There's so much money and power being thrown at this, power by political power, not by electrical, that at some point you're going to lose. Somebody's going to lose. So if that's the case, how can you get something more out of it? That's been the part that bothers me from both sides, the people who hate the idea of them and the people who want them everywhere, is there a benefit? And that's what this research is about.
Okay. So the agreement that you reach has to reflect both sides.
Yes.
Okay. And that changes the whole idea of what a partnership is. Correct?
Yeah.
So a good partnership is not just a company making donations after the project is approved. I mean, donations could be nice, but a school could get computers or, a park could get some improvements. So they're making these offers.
Yeah, that's tiny stuff.
Yeah, little stuff. The real partnership is in the infrastructure agreement because we all want more infrastructure. I mean, if the town is providing the access, the utility capacity, the public services, the land use, the tax incentives. I mean, in return, it should leave the community with a stronger system than it had before they came. Right. Like a stronger water infrastructure or better roads or more reliable electrical service. I mean, we don't have awesome electrical service everywhere in Llano County, and it would be great if we had more reliable electrical service. Like improved communications, maybe fiber or better capacity for internet in your town. So there's all of these economic opportunities that matter if the company could change ownership. I think that's what's happening to a lot of places. You have companies that are coming in and they're building the data centers, and then it's kind of like, when you get a mortgage on your home and then all of a sudden
they sell your mortgage to somebody else.
They sell your mortgage. I think that a lot of these data centers are being built by a lot of investors because they think, oh, well, if this is in a good location and I get this set up really well, then Google or Amazon or some bigger company is going to come pay me a lot of money to buy the data center from me.
Well, they're also similar to the construction people at our schools. They come in to construct, but they don't want to own. They just want to leave.
Right. And so 10 years from now, I mean, make sure you have that stuff in place. Make sure you have what you're going to get from this company, because you never know when the company that you signed the agreement with is going to go away.
Well, and they're a construction company, which means they're going to go away. in all likelihood, it's going to be a construction company that comes in, and maybe even an investment firm. They never intended to have ownership of it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you make an agreement with them and you get all excited because you got all these construction jobs, just like the school district, a lot of things going on when we're doing construction on these bonds.
They're all
gone
gone.
now.
Yeah. The hotels loved it when they were here, but
Yes.
they're all gone now.
Yes.
So it's a very different standard from saying, you've created these construction jobs, you've sponsored the football scoreboard, you've got all this stuff that you've donated, but the scale of the project matters.
Mm-hmm.
One reason small towns may underestimate their negotiating position is that the numbers involved are so much larger than the normal city budget. So when these small cities start hearing millions and millions and millions of dollars,
and their whole budget is a couple of $1 million, or 10 million, or whatever.
It's overwhelming, and they think it's just going to be like awesome. So
because all that billions are going to get shared, and they're not. So
an AI data center can support an enormous amount of revenue, but that does not mean that the company keeps all of it.
And they're going to tell you that.
The equipment is expensive. The power bills are huge. The technology is going to become obsolete. The scale still matters.
It does.
A water reuse line that sounds unaffordable to like a small town may be a manageable project for a facility that's coming in.
Spending $1 billion making it.
Right. They're wanting to operate at this level. I mean, and the same is going to be true for like road repairs. We have a lot of roads that need to be repaired.
Because of construction stuff.
And it's not in our normal budget in the city to get those roads repaired.
Right.
So if you have a company that's coming in,
by all means, negotiate.
I think in political, isn't this called, what is it called when they put stuff in a bill or they put stuff in to try to pork? That's exactly what it's called.
This isn't really pork, though, because in a sense, pork tends to be, well, it's kind of pork, because political pork means the bill has nothing to do with what you're putting in the bill, but it benefits you.
Right. So a city could go,
you know what?
We'd like all of our parks to be updated. And if you're going to bring in a data center 10 miles out of town, we want you to beautify some of our parks for us.
Right. I think that the infrastructure needs to be the focus. That all my research that I did talks about the infrastructure stuff.
Okay. So on with that, let's talk a little bit about
some of the things you can do.
Yeah, but and you need to remember the point is not to punish the company or make unreasonable demands. It's to make sure the people who already live in the town are not just quietly subsidizing the project through their damaged roads or their strained utilities or higher rates that might come their way. What do you think? Am I right on that?
Yeah, I think what you're basically getting down to is the leverage. They have more leverage than they think.
Mm-hmm.
But once a project gets under construction, which is all my research said over and over again, if you just assume that they're going to do all these things, again, I keep referring back to our bond projects. If it wasn't definitively written down, what's the old saying? A verbal contract's worth the paper it's written on.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of what they're saying here. Don't wait till the construction starts. You need to have your ducks in a row before anybody breaks ground, before anything happens.
Don't put permits in place. Don't do anything like that until you know exactly
until you know what you're going to get out of it.
Yeah. So this is the front end work that we're talking about right now. So it's like before your zoning changes are made, before your water commitments are done, before your road access agreements happen, before your tax incentives are offered. That is when the town needs independent engineers, legal counsel, water specialist, and someone who knows a lot about finance for financial analysis. I mean, the company is going to have these experts and they're going to say, yeah, we got all this, but the town needs its own experts too. And the developer should pay the reasonable cost of reviewing a project that's this large.
Yeah, just make sure the reviewers aren't owned by them.
Right.
Again, we've seen
Bring in independent
We've seen that that's why we managed our last bond project ourselves.
The technology section.
Not just the technology, with Atlanta ISD managed.
Oh, yeah, we did.
Because we had trouble in the past where it seemed like the people managing on our behalf seemed to be more They were
for
way
the
too
construction
they were way too
companies.
comfortable with the construction companies. I'm not saying anything bad happened. I'm saying it's human nature when you work with people on multiple projects, like a lot of these managers do. You get to be sort of biased toward them.
You get to know the people, you get to know the construction companies, you become friends with them,
And you start
become friends,
trusting
and
them
you start
more than
trusting them.
you know them.
Yeah. So let's talk about the very first major test. And to us, this is the most important thing
In Texas.
in Texas especially, but really everywhere, because
It's
your
true.
research has backed this up.
Yes.
The first major test is water. In Texas, water may be the clearest test of whether a company really intends to be a good partner. And a town should be very cautious about providing scarce drinking water to cool a large industrial facility when treated wastewater may be able to do the job. Because treated wastewater, often called like reclaimed or unpotable water, it can be processed for uses that do not require drinking water quality. Texas regulations specifically allow that reclaimed water can be used for cooling these
Cooling these systems.
the
But
systems,
cooling
the towers,
well,
the
the cooling
CPU
towers are
towers.
where the heat gets released, and it gets released through evaporation.
Mhm.
And you have to have the laws in place, because if you think about what you're doing is you're evaporating water that's technically reclaimed water, which means it's going out everywhere. But in the process of evaporating the water, you're cleaning it enough.
Right, for it
Because-
to be recycled into the
Well,
system.
it's already been recycled. You just
Technically.
you don't want it raining down on you if you thought it was polluted water.
Right.
But it's not really going to be that polluted because it's already been processed once. Purple pipe water, or whatever the terms they keep using for it are, it's already been through the processing plant. So
Right.
anyway,
It's not a futuristic idea.
no, there's people doing it.
It's really not. I mean, it is already being done
Mhm.
to where they're using non-drinkable water and they're using it to cool these plants. I mean, there was a local authority in Douglas County, Georgia, I think you found in your research.
Yeah, they're working with Google.
That was on a system that uses the treated wastewater for all of the cooling. And I think Microsoft and the city of Quincy and Washington also use a reuse system. And that's like reducing the facility's reliance on drinking water.
Don't-
And that's a commodity. I mean, drinking water is a commodity. I mean, I taught fourth grade science. I taught about the water cycle. And it says that, our water is in an infinite loop, and we
It's a
always
closed loop
have,
system.
it's a closed loop system.
Yeah.
But something I had to always remind my kids is just because it's in a closed loop system doesn't mean
You
it's
can drink it.
drinkable.
Yes.
Right. So the systems are different. The principle's the same. The data center helps pay for the infrastructure that preserves drinking water for the residents.
Yes.
So what do you keep coming back to whenever you're talking about
Well, it's
these data centers? I know
the
you
research
told me
came back-
earlier when we were talking before we decided to do this podcast right here, is that it was really difficult to find good things about what data centers could do for towns.
well, that's because a lot of the focus in the press right now, because it's getting more clicks, is on the negative.
Okay.
It's when you work as an engineer, you talk a lot about the term I heard over and over, fit for purpose.
Fit for purpose?
Yes. In other words, the right tool or the right resource, which water is the resource in this case, for the purpose. I know when we lived in Florida, that a lot of there was water, they used the non-potable water a lot to water plants on the roads,
Mhm.
and on those barriers between the two roads,
Mhm.
because it wasn't drinking water.
Right.
And nobody's walking out there. In other words, you're not spraying a pedestrian with it because it's literally down
In
the center.
between the medians.
It's in between. It's the part where nobody walks. It's just decoration. So pick the right resource that fits the purpose you need it for. It may be easier initially to get the clean drinking water, but it's not the smartest move.
I agree. So, they can take the water, they can use water that has been treated,
Yes.
they can use non-drinkable water. But doesn't that water still have limits?
Well, it has limits in Texas, especially. you have to, again, it's back to that analysis piece. You have to go and what is their water usage? And that water usage may be higher than the amount of water that the city of Llano has, 1,500 or 3,000 connections or whatever it is to the water system. That wastewater, there's only so much of it. So, but
where's the rest of the
data
water
center
gonna come
needs
from?
more water.
Correct.
So it may not be enough.
So even though a town hears the words recycled water, don't stop asking those questions, because how much water is the facility actually going to consume? How much will be evaporated?
Yes.
How much can be returned? Is this a closed loop cooling system that they're using? And then what happens during drought restrictions?
We don't have droughts in Texas.
We don't have droughts in Texas? Gee, that's new to me.
Ask all the plants in our front of our house that died.
I mean, we have droughts quite often. We have a lot more drought years than we do rainy years.
Lately.
That is absolutely for sure. Is the town going to get public reports? Are they going to get a company's sustainability statement?
It's interesting because that you mentioned that, because I was reading that one of the protests people have is that some of these counties and towns, these people in charge, they're signing NDAs. In other words, you can't get, once these are signed, they can't release the water usage information.
So, okay, hang on.
That's not,
hold on.
That's not,
so let me make sure I've got this clear. The city government is signing an NDA saying they're not going to release these sustainability reports or these water quality reports.
Or how much water they're using.
Public.
That's correct. Or even how much water they're using.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay. So you need to make sure that reclaimed water is part of the conservation plan, but it cannot simply become another unlimited supply for evaporation. The town should negotiate limits on both the drinking water use and the total water consumption.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we've talked about water. Now let's take a second and talk about power and where power and water collides. So there's another reason data centers get complicated in the state of Texas.
Yeah, we don't connect to any other grids, one thing.
We don't connect.
ERCOT. I mean, we have regions where in Texas, but in general, we generate the power that we use in Texas.
Right. We don't get it from anywhere else.
We don't get it from other places much, at least.
So a data center doesn't just need a lot of water. It needs a lot of electricity, right? It needs both of those resources to be available in the same place. And so a location may look ideal because it's like close to a major transmission line or it's close to a substation, but that doesn't mean the local water system can support an industrial customer of that scale. All right. So like around the Dallas-Fort Worth region, a project could be close to these strong transmission infrastructure lines or like a major reservoir system. That the facilities that are moving into these rural counties are encountering water utilities that simply don't have the treatment capacity or the pipeline capacity to deliver millions, I'm going to repeat that, millions of gallons of drinking quality water to just one customer. Just one customer. That's one reason that reclaiming wastewater can become so important. And the developer can help fund that treatment and that pipeline improvement in exchange for that dependable industrial water supply without taking the same amount from the drinking water system. Okay? You got to remember that. In parts of West Texas and the Panhandle, there's not a lot of surface water available.
Right.
These things are coming from underground. So the project is going to turn to like groundwater.
Start drilling wells.
And they're going to start drilling those wells. And your father used to always say, if I take a cup of water and I put one straw in it, that's going to quench the thirst of one person. But if I put 20 straws in it and 20 people are drinking out of the same cup of water, no one's going to have enough water.
Yeah, and these reservoirs are like a finite cup of water. A lot of them are recharged by rain and stuff like that. But when you get up in the Panhandle, people don't realize how this is, again, sounding negative, and it kind of is, but that reservoir up there that they're tapping into,
the one they're tapping into,
that's what waters all that corn.
That's right. You're in direct competition with the farms and the ranches and the household wells and the communities that are depending upon this aquifer. And as I just said, if there's too many straws in the hole, no one's going to get enough. So this is where Texas groundwater law creates a particularly important concern because Texas generally recognizes that a landowner owns the groundwater beneath the land as real property. And a company can therefore buy or lease rural acreage, not as a building site, but to gain access to the groundwater beneath it. Now, I'm originally from East Texas, and in East Texas, if you owned the mineral rights on your property,
They had a well there too.
that was really important. I mean,
And water is now
it's not just for oil. There's like natural gas and a bunch of other stuff. And
Right.
now the aquifers and the groundwater and the tributaries underneath a piece of property,
well, they're already having trouble.
it's as important as oil almost.
In trouble with these in East Texas too, with these bottled water, these water bottling companies. They come in, they buy up this land so they can drill wells and start pumping water, and then they sell the water elsewhere.
Well, the other thing that we had to be really, really careful was in East Texas was slant drilling.
That was the oil well problem.
That was the oil problems, but I could see something like that if you know.
I'm going to drill underneath your property.
You've got to be careful.
You know, in reality, with the water thing, the slant drilling becomes less of an issue. Though it depends on how that water is. If it's a pool of water, that's one thing, like the reservoirs we talked about. Like the one up in the Panhandle, as I understand it, was probably put there when the Ice Age melted. So all this water was in the ground and it's been there since the Ice Age. It's a massive multi-state pool of water. Out here, though, water flows through cracks and rocks, which means it's not a reservoir, which means you could slant may or may not help. When it really does help is when you have like a kind of a, it's not sandy soil, but it's a porous rock kind of thing.
Like a limestone.
You drill into it. It is limestone. You drill into it, you make a hole,
and then it collects.
And the water collects. Well, now you can make, the more holes you can make to get the water collect, the more you can bring in that water that's moving through that limestone formation.
Mm-hmm. So groundwater conservation districts are going to need to start requiring permits.
But you have to set those up.
You have to set them ahead of time because this is what's happening is as soon as they come in and they pull permits or they start talking about,
Yeah, I'm not sure.
you know,
I know you can't change. We talked about that
zones.
last time. Zoning. I don't know about the water. I didn't do enough research on
You
the water
need to look
conservation
into.
districts
You need to look
as to
into
whether or
it.
not you can set one up after the fact. But I
Right.
bet you
So
can.
right now, start talking about permits that you're going to require, limitations to production, how far apart wells can be, how big a tract size can be, exporting in stuff, exporting in water. I mean, these are all protections that are going to vary across the state. And, you know, some places have much weaker oversight than others. So in practical terms, a large developer may be able to buy enough land, drill high capacity wells, and legally draw from an aquifer that also supplies like neighboring farms and neighboring homes, and the aquifer does not stop at that person's property line. So just because I have access to an aquifer under my property doesn't mean somebody next door doesn't also have access, and then they can just pump from next door.
Yeah, a lot of the research, and I hadn't thought about that when I was working on this thing, but a lot of the research that I pulled over the last couple of days talks a lot about that because I know about water conservation districts, but I never thought about some areas not having them. I don't think we have one in Llano County.
Possibly not.
I've heard about it, but I'm not sure. Of course, we don't have the amount of water they're looking for. So
Exactly. I mean, we don't. So your local leaders need to know which groundwater district has jurisdiction, what production limits actually exist, whether water can be exported.
like we talked about with the water companies coming, the bottled water companies.
Yes.
They draw in tens of millions.
Can they take my water and take it elsewhere?
Yes. And that's effectively what's happening.
And then, of course, how declines will be monitored and what happens if a neighboring well is affected. So
trouble in Georgia.
wells are going dry.
Yeah.
In other parts of Central Texas, a large campus may seek raw surface water through like a river authority, like the LCRA, or another regional supplier rather than relying on a small system in a small town. And that may protect the city drinking water capacity, but it's going to raise questions about drought and river health and competing users and treatment cost and what happens when the water availability falls below the assumptions used when the project was approved. So the specific source changes from one region to another, but the basic question does not change. Where will the water come from during normal operations? Where will it come from during drought years? And who bears the risk if their forecast was wrong?
Well, we had the drought back in 2011 here, and the river dried up. By dried up, I mean there was still water there,
Oh, it's trickle.
but it was just a trickle. And the problem is that the water quality of our treatment plant required the water to be flowing.
Mm,
So when the river stopped flowing at a certain rate,
right.
our plant was no longer rated to give that water for drinking water. So we had a drinking water problem, and that was not what that wasn't. There was no company drawing,
It was
a
just
million
because the
gallons
flow
of
rate
water.
had gone down.
And the LCRA has rules along the entire river
Mhm.
about how much we have to keep flowing. In other words, we can't. It's that dam problem. You can't put up a dam and stop the flow because everyone downstream depends on that water supply.
Mhm.
So it's complicated.
Wow. So there's a hidden part to the water footprint
Mhm.
that we haven't talked about. Most public discussion focuses on this direct water use or the water consumed or the water evaporated at a data center site. Okay. But electricity generation can use water too. So it's not just the closed loop system to keep the CPUs cool in these data centers. We're also talking about electricity.
Well, and
That can use
there's a
water.
little hidden gotcha in there that most people aren't talking about either.
Okay.
These power generating plants, right? Some of these companies are publishing things saying we're using a type of cooler that's not evaporative. We're using a different type of cooler, so we don't use as much water. Guess what that cooler requires? Electricity.
Okay.
Guess what? It means that the electricity usage for the data center now goes up, even though the appearance of the water usage has went down. All you've done is shift the problem to
From
another
one to
location because wherever the power is being generated
Mhm.
has to have the water
Right. To keep
for the
it cool.
for the coolant in the plant.
So natural gas, coal, nuclear power plants, they're commonly used water in their steam
That's how they generate
cycles,
the electricity.
right? And their cooling systems.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to East Texas, you're going to see the steam coming off of some of these
Well,
things.
those are the natural gas ones
Natural
and
gas
stuff. They got a lot of because they've got natural gas wells in East
Right.
Texas.
So when a data center draws an enormous amount of power from the ERCOT grid,
Which is what we have here in Texas.
some of that water footprint may occur at the power plant that's actually miles away
It will occur
from
there.
the data center.
Yeah, it will occur there. The question is again, you have to be careful when they come to your state and they say, we've gotten more efficient. We
Mhm.
don't have evaporative cooling anymore. Therefore, we don't use as much water. It's all good.
But one town over where
But
where
Where the
your
power
plant's
generation,
located
the
at.
power plant is now using more water.
Right.
And Texas only has so much water.
Correct. So researchers at the University of Texas estimate that when on-site cooling and the water associated with the electricity generation are considered together, data centers could account for roughly 3 to 9% of all Texas water use by 2040.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. Today, the estimate is less than 1%.
And we just talked to somebody the other day, was talking about Google building a major additional plant up in the Panhandle, Microsoft building a major plant down around
Medina?
Medina's had some serious drought down there.
Yes, they have. So that range is a projection. It's not a certainty. I mean, but UT researchers have really been looking into this. It definitely depends on how many projects are actually built and what cooling systems they use and what sources they're using to generate their electricity. But it makes a point very clear. A data center can appear relatively water efficient at the property line while still creating a larger water demand through all the electricity that it's consuming.
So if it depends on, again, whether you're trying to be a good citizen,
Yes.
but the town really needs to look at the water separate from the electricity. Don't
It
just
should
look
be
at
two separate projects.
look at them as two separate things and definitely don't forget the drought plan. That's the one that worries me the most. We moved back here
2004.
22 years ago. We've had how many? 2, 3 droughts?
3.
Since
I
then?
mean, we had a drought that I was literally taking my bath water out of my bathtub and watering my plants with my bath water
I remember that.
because we were running out of water.
We were on a committee, or I was on a committee where they were talking about how to collect rainwater off the roofs in the downtown
Right.
to try to feed it into the water system.
And unfortunately, what has been happening, and we talked
Unfortunately, they
about,
didn't have any rain to collect.
well, and we talked about this last time. What's been happening is that we have this big drought and we start making these plans about the rainwater collection systems
Yeah.
or putting in additional wells or piping water from somewhere else and yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden a flood comes.
Yeah.
And we stop thinking about it.
Yep.
So, it's one of those things. Some Texas communities are already beginning to write these expectations. They're putting them into their local rules. Some of the ones that you found, San Angelo has adopted requirements in 2026 calling for like closed loop or similar water conservation cooling technologies. They're placing strict limits on routine potable water use for data center cooling. They want it to be non-potable. They really want them to start looking at that
San Angelo has a serious water problem.
They do. So they are being proactive instead of reactive. Now, it doesn't mean that one town should take and say, hey, we're going to do what San Angelo did. We're going to copy this
Different set of
ordinance
circumstances.
word for word. It does show the value, though, of establishing those rules before the project arrives in your town, instead of just trying to negotiate it after the utility commitments have made. You need to make sure that you're thinking about this ahead of time. So let's now we've talked about water, we've talked about power. Now let's talk about taking this project and actually turning it into a water system upgrade, which is what a lot of towns have been doing. Okay. Many towns are already losing this treated water through their aging pipes, their leaks. There's so many leaks, their pressure problems, inaccurate meters. I mean, the water's already been pumped and treated. The town has already spent money on it, but then it disappears into the ground before they can actually use it again. I mean, one of the things that we do at our water treatment center is we literally water fields with the water that's being treated because there's so much of it that's not drinkable and we can't just store it. So we're using it for other things. So instead of looking at a data center only as a new water customer, maybe you should ask the company if they can help you recover water that you're already losing. I know that we have leaks in Llano all the time.
Every town does. As a matter of fact, they have an unbelievable number of leaks that, they lose more water in cities in many cases from leaks and that's not just the non-potable water, that's the potable water.
That's potable water.
Google
household leaks is huge.
Some of the research that I did, Google took one town, they put in a whole bunch of these acoustic things that I think Llano might have put those in specifically to detect leaks. So they basically upgraded the leak detectors so then they could get there and fix them. So Google didn't give them more water, but they gave them more ability to not lose as much water. So that may give the town a little bit more water to supply to a data center if they're doing it. Even a small town like Llano, this is not, it's hard to find this information online, but I did as much research as I could. And the estimate was that Llano loses 15 million gallons a year of
just to loss. To leaks and
treated, that's treated water. That's not non-treated water.
Okay. Right.
I don't know if that's true or not, but it's reasonable in a town this size to think they could be losing tens of thousands or millions of gallons.
Yeah, it's historical data.
Yeah, that's data I found. So
the exact number is actually less important. I think what's important is the scale of the problem. I know when we were doing research 6 months ago about something we did about data centers, we were talking about golf courses using a lot of water, and the two top things that we have for water usage in the United States, number one was household leaks.
Well, it was just leaks in general. It wasn't household. It was the whole system.
Undetected leaks.
Undetected leaks. You lose more water from that in golf course than data centers.
That's correct. I think that's changing though. A data center agreement, like you just said, it could pay for the acoustic thing like it's been paid for. City-owned monitoring systems that helps the public works staff be able to know and prioritize and go fix it quick.
I mentioned Google funded one of those.
Funded one of them in it. I think it was in Omaha. So a small Texas town would maybe need something really smaller, but the basic idea would still transfer. The agreement should include, the repair money, finding the leaks with having to use money to fix them, having them, if they're going to use the water and they need more water, then maybe they could fund some of the equipment for.
Yeah, the city needs to keep the ownership of that equipment, because
when they leave.
Well, it's not just when they leave. It's also that, again, if you're going to be a good partner with the city, everything needs to be open.
Right.
And that knowing the city owns that data means that somebody's not trying to bury something.
Right. That's true. That's very true.
That's why you don't want it to belong to the data center.
Right. You don't want that to belong to the data centers. You want it to belong to the city. So you never want it to become inaccessible.
Right. Even if the data center gives you the processing power to process the data.
Right. The water system belongs to the town, and the benefit should remain with the town. So the simplest version of this idea is you use the data center to improve the community's water infrastructure, not compete with the community for the water that you have. So now let's talk about heat.
Okay, let's pause for a second.
Okay.
Because we're going way over time. I got a lot of data in here. Do we want to keep going?
We're going.
Oh, we're going to keep going?
We're going.
We're going. Okay.
Okay. Let's talk about heat.
Okay.
Water is not the only resource involved. Okay.
Well, it's not the only waste product.
Right.
The water, if you think about it, the resources that are coming in, heat is purely a waste product, typically. Water comes in, but even if you're using waste water, that waste recycled water, that's still kind of an input.
Mm-hmm.
But computers literally turn electricity into heat.
Yes.
What do you do with the heat?
That's the problem. Almost all the electricity used by the computing equipment eventually becomes that heat, and that heat has to be removed.
Yep.
And usually the heat is treated as the waste product, like you just said.
Mm-hmm.
But if the facility is designed correctly, some of it can be captured and used somewhere else.
Yes.
So the best known example from all of our notes is a place called Odense, Denmark. It's not in the United States. It's in Denmark. And they're taking heat from a meta data center, and they're feeding it into the local heating system that serves thousands of houses.
And their goal is they've got some gas or coal generated plants they want to get rid of.
Mm-hmm.
So they're trying to use this as part of that equation.
And when I say the heat system, I mean it is heating homes.
Well, it's heating
in
homes.
the winter.
It's also, you can use it to heat water. It doesn't
hot water
have to be the
heaters.
water.
My
It's the
pool
heater.
heater.
Exactly. So in other words, if it heats the water up a little bit before the hot water heater in the house gets a hold of it, it doesn't take as much electricity to heat it the rest of the way up because it's already preheated.
So the homes in Denmark are actually saving money on their own electricity because the meta center that came in is providing warm.
That's their goal.
Yes, that is the goal. Now, Texas is not Denmark.
No,
okay?
it's not near as cold here.
We're not trying to melt snow when we don't have snow,
No,
not very often. We're not trying to heat an entire city through a really long winter, but it still could have value here.
It has the potential to do work.
It can support greenhouses, agricultural, food processing, wastewater treatment, industrial hot water are like businesses that are located close to facilities.
You could have an industrial park next to the city.
Right. I mean, it creates
next to the data center.
It creates a lot more interesting economic development models to where you can grow more than just a data center economic development model and grow it to other things. Like instead of building just one isolated center in a town, like you said, you could put an industrial park next door or an industrial or agricultural business park and take advantage of not just the heat, but we're talking more fiber, more reclaimed water, more electrical infrastructure, more things that you're getting from this data center coming to your town. So use that for other things. Okay. The key is what?
It's always about planning.
Always about planning.
If you start it first it's always easier to do something right the first time than to go back and fix it.
Right. Because it gets harder and it gets more expensive.
That's correct.
When it's an afterthought. So a promise to study heat reuse later is not the same as a plan. I mean, don't let them come in and say, oh, yeah, we'll look into that later. I mean, a town needs to ask for an engineering study during the design phase, okay? What temperature is available? How much of it can be moved economically from one place to another? Who is it that could use it? Would demand be year round? Is it just seasonal? Could the cooling system use a separate clean water loop and then a heat exchanger? I mean, some ideas are going to work and some of them are not going to work, but the town should get real answers before the heat is just thrown away into the
Dumped into the atmosphere.
because that's not good. Okay. Whatever heat cannot be reused should be rejected with as little water consumption as possible or as practical, including like dry cooling and things that are designed for like what the climate will allow.
Yes. If you've got a lot of humidity like East Texas, evaporative cooling's not going to work.
No, it's not. I mean, we used to have that problem of water coolers.
You can't use a swamp cooler there because it's already a swamp.
It's already a swamp. You can't use a swamp cooler. They're not efficient, and all that moisture reaps havoc inside a home with the wood and woodwork and stuff. So let's move on to the next thing, which is, of course, roads, public safety. The same basic rule applies to electricity. The project should pay for the infrastructure it requires for this electricity. The large data center can need substations or transmission upgrades or backup generators. Or, I mean, I know Elon Musk has just bought a company that does diesel backup generators. There's these major new utility capacities that you might need, and existing customers should not be left paying for those costs through higher electricity rates. You need to make sure that that cost is getting like absorbed in the project whenever they're completing these data centers in your town. You also need to know, what's going to happen during a grid emergency, because as we said in a previous podcast, these data centers are 24/7. They don't want downtime. So can the facility reduce its load at certain periods of time? How much backup generation is it going to need to have in operation? What kind of fuel is going to be stored there? Because they're not going to let themselves go down. So they're going to have these diesel generators or, these backup supplies. What will the noise or the emissions be? And will there be any new electrical infrastructure improvement that's reliable for the surrounding community, or is it only going to serve the data center? So these are all questions that you really need to ask. And the roads need the same level of attention because construction is going to involve heavy trucks, and the town needs to document your road conditions beforehand. You need to know, it's like doing a walkthrough in an apartment before you actually move in. You need to document the condition before they get there, because you're going to want to come back and say, no, we ran into this problem with sand trucks. They had a very, very large sand plant out in Voca, which is a little town outside of here. And after about 2 years, if that long, the roads were in horrible condition. I mean, the big potholes and the cracks and the bridges. I mean, it's just, there's a lot of weight, right? So you need to establish what routes are they going to be allowed to take? Are they going to be able to come through your beautiful historic bridge that is in your downtown area? What kind of repair standards are you going to have for your roads? What kind of financial security are you going to get? So if the project does leave, they're not going to leave the public with that bill to go and repair the roads. The other thing you need to think about is emergency services, because data centers that use, a lot of water, a lot of hot comes out of data centers. There could be some specialized type injuries that might happen in a data center. That
how to put out lithium-ion battery fires,
something like that. To where is your emergency medical? Is your firefighters? Are people going to need to have some specialized training? Are you going to need some specialized equipment?
Yeah.
If you have to go in and work on these high voltage systems, okay, the fuel storage, fire, like fuel fires and stuff. So you got to think like that. It cannot become something that's unfunded for a small volunteer fire department.
That's what we have here.
Which is what we have here. So that's very, very important. The cost, they're not the side issues.
No, they're real costs. And I run an IT department. We're very well aware of the longer term maintenance costs after something's constructed is a whole lot more expensive in many cases than the original construction.
And we ran into this when it came to like some of the grants that were in place because of COVID. Some of the grants that we ended up getting, like all these hot spots and things like that. And that was amazing that the government stepped in to allow this. But then we had to really think ahead. What happens when that grant runs out? What happens when that fund is no longer there?
In many cases, we couldn't afford it.
We couldn't afford to keep it. In many cases, you just can't afford to keep it. So the project should pay its own way. And that does not mean the town should try to profit from every possible problem. It just means the town should not lose money because a very large private project has arrived. Last thing.
Okay.
Broadband and workforce benefits. Okay. That last. Data centers demand high capacity fiber, and it can create a real community benefit if it is negotiated correctly. Okay. A town in Iowa connected Google's presence with a large public Wi-Fi initiative. The small town chose a different approach. It negotiated additional conduit, and it reserved fiber strands for the city to use.
Yep.
Okay.
Similar to what we did here.
Similar to what we did here with the LCRA. We negotiated the school use of the fiber, but fiber's there now for the water facility and the hospital.
Well, they're
and
required. The
city
LCRA is required for their electrical grid monitoring to have the fiber anyway.
Right.
So it helped them and it helped us.
It helped them and it helped us. So you could use the project to strengthen that middle mile infrastructure that makes up broadband expansion. And the benefits could be very specific. You could say this project will improve connectivity. That's not enough. It needs to say who's going to own the fiber, who's going to use the fiber, where's the fiber going to go, who's going to maintain the fiber, when is it going to be available. This is something we ran into with the little project we did, is that there was a section that was maintained by the LCRA, and then there's a little section that actually ended up supposed to be maintained by us.
Yeah.
So we ended up having to contract it to where it's actually maintained by somebody else because we don't have anybody on staff that can maintain
climb
fiber.
poles.
Yeah. I mean, so the same thing also is going to apply to your workforce development. They're going to come in and they're going to say, hey, we're going to have a hiring fair and we're going to hire all these people, but that is not a workforce pipeline. All right. A strong program identifies the actual job that's going to be there, the credentials it's going to require you to have, and the number of positions, and maybe even a training provider so that they're not just bringing in people from outside your town that are going to be here for a few years and then move elsewhere. You might want to consider, hey, if they're going to bring 100 jobs, I want to make sure that there's 100 people in my town
that are
trained that could take those jobs.
Okay. We probably need to wrap up. We're way over time.
The skills are useful. Electrical, networking, controls, HVAC, maintenance, water operations, emergency response. All of these jobs could be trained for this data center to have working at the data center. And then when the data center does go down to minimum number of people working there, I have a skill that I can now go put elsewhere.
Bottom line, to wrap it up, what's the bottom line to you? Excuse me.
Research, and don't allow them to come in and say, I've got you covered.
The only additional thing I would add to that is the details matter.
Yes.
Meaning stuff like the water conservation. It's not just about negotiating. It's about understanding the laws that apply to you. Right. County, city, state, federal. We talked about that in the legal stuff. You have to have your ducks in a row legally. But the most important thing that I think that I got out of this bit of research is, at the end of the day, at least for some period of time, try very hard to think about, how can I make this a positive? If they're going to be here, how can I make this a positive for the community? Through job development programs, through infrastructure upgrades, through all the things we talked about.
Correct.
Okay.
And a press release is not an agreement. A handshake is not an agreement. A verbal is not an agreement. It is one of those things that you have to have it. And you have to have independent attorneys, independent reviews.
Yep. I agree.
And then you can figure out how to have a good relationship.
I think it's possible. It may be impossible in some areas. I do think there's a lot of engineering that needs to go and thoughts that need to go into the water part. I'm more worried about the water part than any part because I live in Texas.
Okay.
So, anyway.
So, my name is Maurie. I'm here with my husband, Jim. Thank you guys so much for watching AI in action. We hope that you have gotten something from these last 2 episodes and this episode in our little 3-part mini series.
And we are going
on
to publish all this.
data
Going
centers.
to organize all my notes a little better, and then we're going to publish it.
Sounds good. We hope that you guys have a marvelous rest of the week.